Hillis's, located in the historic Haymarket District, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Welcome again to the Victory Garden. I'm Roger Swain. Today, Lucinda Mays focuses on container planting, what goes into a good one, and how to plant one. Bob Mouse reports from Southern California, where he's visiting a woman who is simply mad about koi, those multicolored and patterned fish so prized by the Japanese, and that some would say are an absolutely essential ingredient to fine water gardening. Back here, I'm ready to plant eggplant. Marion will feature in today's recipe. That, how to enter this year's contest, is all just ahead. So please, stay tuned.
Funding for the Victory Garden is made possible by viewers like you, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by Monrovia Nursery Company, producers of container-grown ornamental plants, available at nurseries and garden centers nationwide. Stern's Miracle Grow products, bringing the joy of gardening to generations of Americans.
NK Lawn and Garden. Seeds, lawn products, gardening books, and products for the young gardener. Helping families grow for over a century.
Hi, and welcome again to Victory Gardens South at Callaway Gardens. Our visitors have really enjoyed our moss garden that we planted last year. Everything's starting to settle in. The mosses are knitting together. The little ground covers are starting to run. In fact, we've only had one casualty. This moss right here. For some reason, the wren likes this for her nest. Not this moss, not that moss, this moss. So we take what she doesn't want, poke it back in, and keep the water on it. It'll settle back in time for her nest next year. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about growing plants in containers. All kinds of containers. Now, here's a very simple, humble bushel basket. But there's some tricks to combining plants in a container so that you have a result you're really happy with. I like to start with something tall, either in the middle or the background. So here's a vine going up a trellis for some height. I like to always include a trailing form, so I've got this fern here coming over the edge. And everyone should also have some kind of a mounding form. So here I've got this ornamental cabbage. Now there's another kind of container here that has only one plant in it. This is a very elegant terracotta plantation urn, and in here we have acanthus, or Grecian pattern plant. It has all the same elements as the last container. The height from this bloom spike, trailing from the leaves, and the whole thing is a mounding form. There's no need to add another plant to that. Now over here, I've got some woody shrubs in a container. This orange is an old spiky plant that you commonly find around old home places in the South, used as a fence to keep goats out of garden spots. Little fruits on it here. Now behind it is a mound of miscanthus, Chinese grass. Later in the season it will shoot up plumes, feathery plumes, seed heads, and that'll finish that part of the design. Cascading over the edge of the pot is this Maitland shrub rose that I found neglected in the back of a greenhouse, and thought I liked the way that it just sort of drips over the edge of this pot. Crazy about the pot. A good friend of mine made it. Beautiful thing. Down here's another container with the same design elements. Shooting right up through the middle is this spiky succulent leaf of the aloe vera plant. It's coming right through a mound of gray artemisia or southernwood, and dripping down over the edge is this Greek oregano, which is the culinary herb. Now I added an accent plant. This little tiny plant of annual red verbena for a jolt of color. Let's take a look at what it's like to put one of these together, because it's a fairly simple process. Now for this demonstration, I have decided to put together some plants in a bushel basket. Now the bushel basket wants to dry out real quickly, so first I want to line it with sphagnum moss. I've got some here that's been soaking overnight in water, and I'm going to put a 3 to 4 inch layer all around the edge and a little way up the side. Now, of course, the bushel basket is going to be wet around the bottom and won't last more than a year, but that's all I really want from this container anyhow. What this sphagnum moss does is keep the moisture on the roots of the plants, and that's critical, because if containers dry out, they don't look so good. A little bit more on the bottom. I got my sphagnum moss at a local garden center. It comes in a bale. One bale would probably do about 20 bushel baskets in the way that I'm doing it, so I have plenty for the rest of the summer. That's it for the moss. Now for the potting soil. I like to buy a soilless mix of pine bark and sand, perlite, maybe vermiculite, little peat moss. This is not the fine mix that's used for starting seeds. This is a coarser mix that'll drain better, still hold lots and lots of moisture. I buy big bags of it because it's less expensive in a big bag, and I always look to see what's in it. This one doesn't have any fertilizers added to it, so I'm going to add my own. And I've got a time release here. This one will last about, 3 months. It's temperature and water regulated, so every time I add water and it's a warm day, a little fertilizer will leach out. I like to use this because it has micronutrients in it, things like zinc and molybdenum, and those are minerals that the plants need too, and it isn't naturally present in potting soil. Okay, fill the basket. You'll notice I haven't wet down the potting soil yet. I'll do that later. Okay. Now for the plants and how to combine them. I've picked mostly perennials for this basket. These are things that'll bloom all summer long and provide the different forms that we've talked about. This is Victoria salvia. This is my tall, spiky plant. I'll loosen the roots a little. Tuck it in. There we go. I'm going to put it to the back because I intend to set this up against a wall. Now for the mounding form right next to it, this is a purple coneflower that was part of a root division that I did when I took the plants out of a part of the perennial border last year. I just tucked this in a pot, and now it's perfect for use in a container like this. Nice loose roots, and I'll snug it down in there. I'll put it pretty tight to that salvia. Now for my trailers. I've got this creeping verbena. This is another perennial. These little 4-inch pots tuck right in on the edge, and I'm going to alternate that with another perennial. This is tender, but it's a good perennial, of creeping lantana. This is spreading sunshine. It's such a bright, hot color that I chose that dark purple verbena to go with it to sort of relieve all that hot color. But it's such a performer. It can take, all of these plants can take the heat of the southern summer, really bloom and grow. I'll have to keep the water on the container, though, and water it every day in the morning. I'm going to add another mounding form to this on this side. This is a real performer in the southern sun. This is Zinnia linearis, little annual. We start from seed in the greenhouse. Daisy-like flowers in the front. And this will form a mound. In fact, I think I'll put 2 of them in there, a big mound of little bright yellow daisies right next to the salvia. Get my roots down in there. I need one more creeping verbena. Break up the root ball and tuck it in. Now these plants are tight in here. I've got a lot of plants, but I wanted my impact right away. I didn't want to wait 3 or 4 or 5 weeks for this basket to fill up. Once these plants get settled in, I'll have a basket of full bloom right now, and even more so in about a week. Now, this is ready to move. I won't water it until I get it where I want it to go because it's going to weigh an awful lot. Now, the great thing about containers is that they're portable, and you can put them anywhere in your garden where you'd like a spot of color or an accent. With a little sunshine, daily watering, this will fill in, and I think it looks pretty good right now. But I'll have summer color the whole season.
It's contest time at the Victory Garden, and the focus this year is water. It can be old or new, large or small. It's easy to enter, and we hope every one of you will. We'll tell you how in a moment, and then for added inspiration, Bob Smouse will take you to Southern California to meet a woman who's water gardened almost her entire life with a special emphasis on koi.
Entering the contest is very simple, providing you're an amateur gardener. All you have to do is send us a photograph of your water garden. No slides, please. A diagram and a list of the plants you're growing. Then send it along with your phone number to the Victory Garden Contest 1992, 125 Western Avenue, Boston, Mass. 02134. Eligible entries must be received by Wednesday, July 29, 1992. All entries become the property of the WGBH Educational Foundation, and they are not returnable.
This year, the Victory Garden is looking for a few fine water gardens as part of its annual Victory Garden Contest. Now, when people think of water gardens, this is usually what they have in mind. The sound of water, a few ornamental plants, a deep, dark pool, and, of course, fish. Now, fish are what this story is about. The breeding and raising of koi, those exotic and ornamental fish so loved by the Japanese and increasingly by Americans. It's the hobby of Dr. Bertrell Caswell. Earlier, she showed us around. Well, Dr. Caswell, you've got this thoroughly screened in. Is there a good reason for that?
There sure is. Predators, mainly birds. Kingfishers for the small ones and blue herons for the big ones.
Giant blue herons?
Yes,
Yeah,
giant blue herons.
Wouldn't want one of those in here either.
No, sure wouldn't.
Now, these look like children's wading ponds. Is
That's
that what they are? Yeah.
The children wading ponds. And this is one of my lower priced ponds here.
Mm-hmm.
The fish in here range, well, there's some year-old and some they'll be 2 years old this summer.
Gosh, they're
Most
sure
of them are
pretty.
year-old. And they're inexpensive.
Oh, yeah, there's a sign that says $25.
yeah, yes.
Well, that's not bad.
But it helps me pay for the hobby.
And these are extras?
Yeah, these are ones that we don't want to keep for ourselves. And they just support us.
Yeah, well, it's an expensive hobby, I guess. Now, these fish are a little more pricey. These are $40, but they're a lot bigger. Are they older?
They're older fish. These fish are very healthy. Beginners who want a fish that they can see. These are great for them. They're not perfect in color or in pattern. But
Here's another tank of $40 fish, but these are much more colorful. Oh,
these are
look
much
at
more colorful. You can tell immediately that this is a higher value, even though there's one-year-olds, same ages in there.
Was the great big one over there a $40 fish, too?
Oh, that fish is $500. She comes from a tank up here. Yesterday, she was kind of teasing young males, and we didn't want her to spawn. So we put her in a tank with younger fish.
So she's just visiting.
She's visiting.
500
right.
is a lot to pay for a fish. Do they get more expensive than that?
Oh, yes, that's an inexpensive breeder fish. Why don't you try 20,000 up?
$20,000? That's my entire yearly salary.
I know what you mean. But you have to open your purse if you're buying your breeding stock from Japan.
Well, what about something that I could afford? Do they get cheaper?
Yes. These are my least expensive fish in here.
These look pretty good to me.
Yeah, they're not bad. For an inexpensive fish, somebody who wants to learn, somebody who sees something in here that we missed when we called fish, once in a while that happens.
They're only $15. I can come up with that.
Right, $15,
Well, now, if these are all the culls, where are the really good fish?
Well, let's go up and see, shall we?
Well, up here I'm hearing the sound of water. Water is obviously something you just don't take for granted with these very fancy fish.
No, what you're hearing here is the filtration system for these ponds up here.
Oh, this is quite an elaborate setup.
It looks elaborate, but it's the, of all the filtration methods I know of, and others work, but this is the easiest on the human being in charge of it. It's the easiest to clean and keep clean of any system I've ever found.
Well, what's in these big tanks?
Basically, there's a mechanism in the bottom that distributes the water. The water comes in at the bottom, and then it comes up through 3/4 gravel, through pea gravel, and a number 12 silica sand.
Oh, this is what you call a biological filter.
This is a biological filter. It's all aerobic bacteria, and they eat the waste from the fish. They actually have to have the ways for the fish to
Quite
live.
impressive. You know, I can hear a cascade or a waterfall in the
That's
distance
right.
here. Let's see what that is. Now, this is a very convincing and natural-looking waterfall, but surely it's also doing something for the fish.
Oh, yes, it wouldn't be there otherwise. The waterfall, notice how it breaks up into bubbles as it comes down? Okay, every time we have a bubble or a break like that, it can get oxygen from the air. And if there's any gases left after coming through the filters, then it will exchange whatever that gas is and pick up the oxygen. So that the water is fully oxygenated by the time it reaches the fish.
Yeah, you'd need a lot of oxygen in this water because there's a lot of fish in these ponds.
There's a lot of fish in these ponds.
How deep is this pond?
This pond is 4 feet. And the occupants here are fish that we are going to spawn, haven't yet, or there are fish, the smaller fish, that we've brought up to observe for a year or so. We think we know what they're going to do and develop, the way they're going to develop, and most of the time pretty most of the time we're pretty right, yeah.
Real
but once in a while
beauties,
once in a while they disappoint us and we take them down for sale. We don't want to keep them, we take them down.
Well, is that a spawning cage or something that
It's
they're
not a spawning cage, but it's where we bring up the fish that have spawned. We put the females in that cage, and we put the males in another one we keep over there. We keep them for about 24 hours until the odor of the spawning is all over, and make sure that they haven't been harmed, that there's no scales missing or
Very
nothing.
complicated business, isn't it?
Well, you gotta take care of your fish.
Gosh, I'll say. Well, let's go down and look at this big pond.
All right.
Dr. Caswell, this is a very dramatic setting for your house.
Well, we planned the house and the pond together. This was just a level piece of land, and we moved in earth by the many truckloads here in order to build it up for our mountain here. Of course, the house sits on 39 concrete and steel piers, and it's also steel support on the inside. These built in 4-foot modules, and it's steel. The pond, of course, has a curbing that is steel worked into it. There's another pier at the corner of the house that goes down with steel and concrete again, and then it's covered with many layers of fiberglass.
It's all tied together.
It's all
and
tied
I like
together.
the way you hid the lip of the pond with the overhanging rocks. That's really nice.
The overhang discourages jumping.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
These big fish jump?
Oh, they can jump, I assure you.
God.
They really can. It makes it look, I think, more natural.
Yeah, definitely.
But once again, there was a
There
purpose.
was a reason.
There was
Is there a
purpose.
reason why the pond goes under this deck here?
Yeah, there's 4
quite
feet.
a ways.
Yeah, 4 feet under there, just for good shade, which they take advantage of when it gets real hot.
What's all the racket I keep hearing in the background? Is this another hobby?
Yes, I love birds.
Oh,
I don't
look
raise
at the
them.
macaws.
That's a little bit too much for me.
So
I just enjoy them.
it's not going to be a business.
No, nothing's going to be a business. If I couldn't operate as a hobby, I wouldn't operate at all.
Well, I got sidetracked here. Let's get back to these gorgeous fish.
Okay.
Actually, these fish rival the parrots in colors, don't they? Look at the size of this fish.
Yeah.
How much
yeah.
does a fish like that weigh?
You know, I have no idea of weight. The hobby goes by length.
Length.
And they measure from the tip of the nose to the very end of the tail. And the only time we're worried about weight is when we have to do surgery.
So it's only fishermen who think about fish in terms of weight.
It could be, yes. And I have really no idea about weight
Well,
on
tell
them.
me what you feed them. You must feed them a lot to get them this big.
They eat many things. Come on, I'll show you here.
Oh, look at this. It's like you were in Kyoto. House is filled with Japanese antiques and crafts. Oh, look at this. The pond comes into the house.
Well, sure.
Well, sure. Doesn't everybody's?
Well, sure.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Face to face with the fish
Yeah.
and sit right down here and watch them?
Yeah, here's where we hand feed them and talk over problems.
Oh, can I feed them?
You certainly can. Absolutely.
Come on, guys and girls.
They're only tooth. You can't reach.
Oh, that's right. They're
Yeah.
toothless.
Right. You'll get just great big kisses.
Oh, they're so sweet. And so big. My goodness. They're bigger than my cat.
Yes. See why the cat doesn't bother them.
I guess so, yeah. I think the cat would be more worried than the fish. Well, this is better than color television. I could do this all day.
Yeah, it really is better than colored television.
Well, Dr. Caswell, I've got to thank you. This has been a real treat.
Oh, you're welcome.
And
Bob.
I'm sure that some of our viewers are going to pest you for those little baby fish we saw.
Good. Then I can buy another big one.
Can I stay here for a little while and feed?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
They will love it.
It's hard to imagine a more interesting hobby, and to think that she can feed all those fish from the comfort of her living room. While here in the vegetable garden, we had a visit a few years ago from Rob Johnston, a seedsman from down east in Maine, where they really know how to make the most of a short growing season. And Rob gave me some tips for raising superior onions. He said it's not enough just to start them early in the spring. You also have to give them a little extra warmth. And so I've had this tent of low cover stretched over these onion plants, and they're really as big and handsome as they have ever been. Now, if you have trouble with onion maggots, the larva of that fly, that little gray fly, which can tunnel down in and destroy your entire crop, try this technique as well, because the same netting that holds in the warmth will also keep the onion maggot fly from getting to those onions. Now, our potatoes are off to a fine start. We have 3 different kinds here. That explains the differences in growth in these 3 beds. I planted them in a trench. Now I'm gradually pulling in the soil around the emerging plants every 2 or 3 weeks. Eventually, the trench will be filled and there'll be a slight hill around each plant, and I'll stop as soon as the plants begin to flower, which is a sign that they're beginning to make tubers. There's one vegetable that we grow outside the vegetable garden every year, and that's eggplant. In the vegetable garden, we have a persistent soil disease called verticillium wilt, a fungus that causes eggplants to turn brown and stunted, and if not die outright, at least yield meager harvests. The only way we found to grow eggplants is either to plant them in containers with a sterile mix or in soil that's never had eggplants before. And I'm planting this eggplant right in the middle of the ornamental annual border, because eggplants are beautiful to look at. And if you're not content simply admiring those purple black fruits, here's Marion with a tip on how to use them.
I've got an order here for 1 open-faced sandwich with sliced tomato and mozzarella cheese, but I'm all out of bread. So I'm going to use eggplant instead. I've removed the top and bottom of an eggplant, and I've peeled it, leaving some of the strips of skin because I think that's so pretty. And then I'm going to slice this into about 1/2-inch slices. And then I'm going to salt these slices. The reason for salting them is that eggplant has a lot of water in it, and the salt draws out the excess moisture. If I let this sit for about 30 minutes, that will all come out, and it will be easier to brown it, and it won't use so much oil. So while I'm waiting for that to weep, I shall make a tapenade, which is 2 tablespoons of a light virgin olive oil, and into that goes, about a teaspoon of chopped garlic. This is going to be a topping for my eggplant sandwiches. And then I'm going to take some of those Mediterranean flavors that I love. This is about 10 black olives that have been pitted and chopped. Stir that into the oil. And then some capers. That gives a nice salty flavor. That's about 2 tablespoons of roughly chopped caper. And a little bit of fresh parsley, about a tablespoon. And then I think 2 tablespoons of fresh sliced basil. And I'll mix this all together, and then I'll let this sit and reheat it briefly just before I serve the eggplant sandwiches. Now, if you look carefully, you can actually see the moisture that has been released from the eggplant by the salting process. Now what I want to do is pat this dry to get it ready for broiling, and that will also get rid of all the salt. Now here I'm brushing each eggplant slice on both sides with a nice light olive oil. This olive oil is important because when I put the eggplant under the broiler, I don't want it to char. This will keep it from doing so. Now, into the broiler, I've got the rack set 8 inches under the heating element, and I'm going to let that brown on one side, and then I'll turn and brown them on the other. Keeping the eggplant 8 inches away from the broiler allows them to brown nicely without burning, and at the same time, the center cooks nice and tender. There, those look just right. And now for the tomatoes and the mozzarella cheese. Now, the next broil, I do want that rack close to the heat because I just want to warm these tomatoes and melt that cheese. Don't these look good? These are ready to serve with a little bit of that tapenade topping. Okay, here's that order for an open-faced eggplant, tomato, and mozzarella sandwich served with a spicy tapenade.
Marion, that should guarantee that a lot of eggplant gets planted. Well, thanks for joining us today. Next time I'll be planting artichokes. Bob's Mouse travels to Salem, Oregon, to visit a nursery whose business is bearded iris and nothing but bearded iris. Best of all, he'll be there when the fields are in full color. Until then, this is Roger Swain for the Victory Garden.
Funding for the Victory Garden is made possible by viewers like you, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by Monrovia Nursery Company, producers of container-grown ornamental plants, available at nurseries and garden centers nationwide. Stern's Miracle Grow products, bringing the joy of gardening to generations of Americans.
NK Lawn and Garden. Seeds, lawn products, gardening books, and products for the young gardener. Helping families grow for over a century.
Tonight, John Garfield stars in one of the greatest boxing films ever made. Watch Body and Soul tonight at 10, following the Omaha Royals baseball game. All here on Nebraska Public Television.
And